What if Coleman Trebor killed Count Dooku? The Petronaki arena was chaos incarnate. What had begun as an execution turned into an all-out war. The Jedi, led by Mace Windu, had emerged in force to rescue Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Padme Amidala, but they had walked into a slaughter. The droid army vastly outnumbered them, and the bodies of Jedi were already littering the sands of Geonosis. Coleman Trebor, a Verk Jedi Master, stood near the edge of the fray, his sharp, reptilian eyes scanning the battlefield. The Jedi were falling. Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi fought desperately near a column of battle droids. Aayla Secura was holding her ground against advancing super battle droids, and Kit Fisto barely dodged a missile launched from a droideka. But none of it mattered. Trebor saw the true source of the disaster. Count Dooku, the leader of the Separatists, stood on a balcony overlooking the arena, coldly watching the carnage unfold. The masterminds of the Clone Wars, the man who had orchestrated this death trap. Trebor clenched his teeth. The Jedi were dying. More would fall if this continued. But if he struck Dooku down now, cut the head off the serpent, perhaps this war would end before it truly began. Decision made. He moved. Blaster bolts tore through the air as Jango Fett, the Mandalorian enforcer, fired rapidly from the sands below, covering Dooku's position. Trebor advanced, his green saber moving in a blur as he deflected the shots. His blade caught a bolt and sent it streaking back toward Fett. The bounty hunter's reflexes were sharp, but even he had to react. The reflected shot forced him to ignite his jetpack, sending him skyward to avoid the attack. In that instant, the line to Dooku was open. Trebor did not hesitate. Dooku had not expected a Jedi to reach him so quickly. He turned, raising an eyebrow in mild surprise as Trebor vaulted onto the balcony with him. The Verk Jedi wasted no time. He lunged, his saber carving a green arc toward the Count's neck. Dooku ignited his curved hilt saber, just in time to parry. The Sith Lord's aristocratic calm faltered slightly as he took a step back. He had underestimated this one. Trebor pressed the attack, his movements fluid and aggressive. He had studied Dooku's dueling style before. He knew the Count was a master of Makashi, a form built for dueling, but Makashi was precise, relying on elegant control. Trebor countered with the unpredictability of Ataru, leaping and striking from shifting angles, keeping Dooku on the defensive. The Sith Lord's frustration grew. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. "You were bold," Dooku said, his voice smooth, but edged with irritation. "But you overestimate your..." Trebor's lightsaber slipped through his guard. Dooku's eyes widened as his green blade plunged into his chest, piercing his heart. His elegant grip on his lightsaber faltered, and the weapon fell from his hand, clattering to the stone floor. Count Dooku looked truly stunned. Impossible. Then, the leader of the Separatists collapsed. Jango Fett, still airborne, turned just in time to see his employer crumble to the balcony floor, lifeless. His eyes widened behind his T-visor. Coleman Trebor stood over Dooku's corpse, breathing heavily. He had done it. He had ended the war before it could begin. But the battle was far from over. Though Count Dooku lay lifeless at the center of the arena, the Separatists had no intention of surrendering. The Republic forces surged forward, but the droids and battle-hardened soldiers of the Separatists were relentless. Even without their leader, the war continued, fueled by the twisted minds behind the scenes. Coleman Trebor moved like a force of nature, his lightsaber an extension of his fury. He cut through the endless ranks of battle droids, his powerful strikes flashing in the smoky air. But despite the victory over Dooku, he couldn't shake the weight of the reality pressing down on him. The Jedi were dying around him. His brothers and sisters who had fought alongside him were falling, their lightsabers extinguished in the chaos. "Stay focused," Obi-Wan shouted, his voice cutting through the din. He parried a blaster shot before redirecting it into the chest of a droid, dispatching it with expert precision. Trebor's heart raced. He had struck down Dooku. He had dealt a blow to the Separatists' leadership, but the battle was still in full force, and the cost of victory was too high. The cries of his fallen comrades echoed in his mind. Was this the price of peace? Yet there was no time for second guessing. "Keep pushing," Trebor called, rallying the remaining Jedi. He dashed forward, meeting an oncoming wave of droids head-on. His movements were fluid, calculated, his blade dancing through the air, deflecting blaster bolts and cutting down the mechanical soldiers with surgical precision. Trebor couldn't let the loss of his fellow Jedi dissuade him. He had already crossed the line by killing Dooku. There was no turning back now. As the battle intensified, Trebor's intuition sharpened. He could feel the shifting tides of the war, the growing uncertainty that gnawed at the edges of victory. The Jedi had won here, but the galaxy still teetered on the brink of destruction. He needed to act. He needed to finish this. His gaze locked on a new, familiar threat, Jango Fett. The bounty hunter had been relentless in his pursuit of the Jedi, and now he was among the survivors, leading a group of battle droids with deadly intent. Trebor didn't hesitate. He darted forward, closing the gap between himself and the bounty hunter. Blaster bolts flew at him, but Trebor was quicker. His lightsaber flashed in a blur, deflecting every shot backward toward Jango. The bolts flew like lightning, each one redirected with impeccable precision. Jango's reaction was swift. He activated his jetpack and soared into the air, narrowly avoiding the deadly barrage. But Trebor was not finished. With a fierce roar, he leapt into the air after Jango, his lightsaber trailing behind him in a streak of light. The bounty hunter's head snapped around in surprise. "You're out of your league, Jedi," Jango snarled, pulling a blaster from his side as he ascended higher. Trebor, undeterred, used the force to propel himself higher. He was on Jango's tail in an instant, his every movement fueled by the battle's urgency. With a swift, decisive strike, Trebor slashed through the jetpack, sending Jango plummeting to the ground with a harsh thud. The bounty hunter was stunned, unable to react fast enough as Trebor landed before him, his lightsaber poised for the final strike. Jango attempted to draw a weapon, but Trebor was too fast. With one swift movement, he sliced through the bounty hunter's weapon and then his torso, bringing the reign of one of the galaxy's most feared mercenaries to a brutal end. The remaining droids hesitated for a moment, thrown into disarray without their leader. Trebor didn't hesitate. He charged forward, cutting through them like a blade through paper, clearing a path for Republic forces to press on. Victory was in their grasp, but Trebor's heart remained unsettled. Even with Jango's death and the droid's retreat, the war had not ended yet. There was still so much left to do. As the last of the droids were defeated, the arena fell silent. The cries of battle subsided, leaving behind the faint hum of lightsabers and a distant wail of approaching Republic gunships. Trebor stood at the center of it all, his chest rising and falling with the weight of exhaustion. "Master Windu," Trebor called, catching Mace's attention. "What's our next move?" Mace looked at him, his expression unreadable. "We push forward. The war is not over. Dooku's death is but a single piece in a much larger puzzle. We must prepare for what comes next." Trevor's thoughts were filled with doubt. He had struck down Dooku, a Sith Lord, but had he truly stopped the tide of darkness, or had he simply fueled it? The fate of the galaxy seemed less certain now than ever. "We are victorious, but the Sith have always had a way of slipping through the cracks," Obi-Wan said, his voice heavy with the burden of truth. "We cannot afford to underestimate them." Trebor nodded, his mind never fully at ease. "The war continues then. We'll fight. We have no other choice." But deep within, he knew that the future was uncertain, and the true test was just beginning. Months passed since the Battle of Geonosis, and the galaxy was thrust deeper into the chaos of war. The Republic's forces fought valiantly, but the death of Dooku had done little to stem the Separatist war machine. If anything, It had made the struggle more brutal. The Separatists, now under the command of General Grievous, were a force of terrifying power and calculation. It was on the planet of Utapau that Coleman Trebor found himself face to face with this new nightmare. The towering figure of General Grievous loomed before him, 4 metallic arms extended outward, each wielding a lightsaber. His mechanical limbs hissed and whirred as he prepared for combat. The cyborg warlord had a reputation, one that preceded him in every corner of the galaxy. His ruthless efficiency in battle, combined with his fearsome ability to wield multiple blades simultaneously, had made him a legend among the Separatists. Trebor stood his ground, his own lightsaber humming in his hand. He had fought countless battles, faced Dooku, survived Geonosis, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Grievous's hollow, raspy voice echoed through the chamber. "Jedi, I've been waiting for this." Before Trebor could react, Grievous struck. His 4 lightsabers slashed through the air with unimaginable speed, forcing Trebor to immediately go on the defensive. Grievous was like a storm, fast, unpredictable, and brutal. Trebor's blade met his, deflecting with all his strength, but the cyborg's attack was relentless. The sheer force of each strike rattled Trebor's body, pushing him back, making him feel small, insignificant. With a single horrifying move, Grievous spun in the air, his lightsabers flashing in every direction. Trebor blocked one, but another came at him from an unexpected angle, slicing through the fabric of his tunic and grazing his side. The pain was sharp, but it wasn't enough to stop him. He danced around the attack, forcing himself to focus, but Grievous's relentless assault seemed to grow stronger with every moment. The cyborg's speed was incredible, his movements a blur, his 4 arms combining in a seamless dance of destruction. Every time Trebor thought he had gained the upper hand, Grievous adapted, countering his strikes with surgical precision. It was a nightmare made real. Trebor had faced powerful foes before, but Grievous was something else entirely. His mechanical body was an extension of his will, and that will was to kill. Coleman Trebor's vision blurred with fatigue, his every muscle screaming for rest. His blade began to slow. Grievous noticed it, and with a brutal twist, his saber connected with Trebor's, sending it spinning from his hand. Before Trebor could react, Grievous grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground with ease. "You're weaker than I thought, Jedi," Grievous sneered. "Your order is full of disappointments." Trebor could barely breathe, his body fighting to stay conscious. The force pulsed inside him, but it was fading. His survival instinct flared. He gathered every last ounce of strength and focused. His hand stretched out, and with a surge of the force, he pushed Grievous back. The cyborg warlord staggered, losing his grip on Trebor for a brief moment. Trebor stumbled to his feet, his breath ragged, blood seeping from his wounds. He could feel the presence of the dark side swirling within him, its pull growing stronger with each passing moment. But there was no time to consider it. Trebor grabbed his lightsaber and launched himself at Grievous, his attacks wild and fueled by desperation. In a final, furious clash, Trebor fought with everything he had, using his skill and the force to push through the pain, the fatigue. He struck with precision, forcing Grievous to parry with his multiple sabers. In a split second of weakness, Trebor took the opening, slashing at Grievous's exposed side. Grievous let out a mechanical scream, his systems faltering. Trebor seized the opportunity, delivering a powerful kick to Grievous's chest, sending the warlord crashing backward. His limbs twitched, sparking as they lost power. Trebor was exhausted, his energy drained, but he couldn't afford to let his guard down. He looked at the broken form of General Grievous, his body sparking and malfunctioning. This was not the end. Trebor knew it, but it was only a temporary victory. The war raged on. With Grievous's defeat, the Separatists only grew more desperate, throwing everything they had at the Republic. But as the Jedi fought to protect the galaxy, Coleman Trebor could feel a change within himself. The darkness that had been whispering in the back of his mind now seemed impossible to ignore. The anger, the rage, the frustration, it all built up with every battle, with every loss. He had seen his brothers and sisters in the Order fall, their lightsabers extinguished one by one, their lives snuffed out in the name of a war that seemed to have no end. It wasn't just the Sith he feared now, it was the very war itself. The Jedi had become soldiers, bound to a never-ending conflict, locked into a cycle of bloodshed that seemed to have no escape. Trebor had always been a warrior, but now his purpose was coming into question. He sat in meditation, his legs crossed and eyes closed, but the peace he once found in the Force was slipping away. Images of the battlefield, of Dooku's death, of Grievous's attack, of fallen Jedi flashed before his mind's eye. The dark side seemed to reach out to him, offering power, offering an end to the pain. Was this what it meant to be a Jedi? Was this what he had signed up for? To be nothing more than a weapon? Another tool in a war that never ended? His fingers trembled as he reached for the lightsaber at his side. The steady hum of his blade used to be a source of comfort, a reminder of the light. Now it felt like a weight, a burden, something that kept him chained to the cycle of violence and endless fighting. The dark side was not just an external threat, it was becoming part of him. The final straw came during the Battle of Coruscant. As the Republic was pushed to the brink, Trebor found himself standing in the midst of yet another fight. Lightsaber in hand, surrounded by his fellow Jedi. But something had changed. The enemy no longer felt like the true threat. The Jedi Order itself. The endless war. The unwavering loyalty to a republic that used them as pawns began to feel like the true enemy. He had always followed the Jedi Code, always believed in their mission, but now it seemed so hollow. The Jedi had become soldiers, just like everyone else. The ideals of peace and justice felt more like a far-off dream, something that couldn't survive in the ashes of war. As Trebor fought on, his strikes becoming more brutal, he could feel the anger inside of him bubbling to the surface. His lightsaber clashed violently with the enemy, and the pull of the dark side threatened to overtake him. He was too strong, too close to the edge. He couldn't do it anymore. After the battle was won, Trebor retreated. He no longer sought the comfort of his fellow Jedi, he sought solitude. Coleman Trebor left the Jedi Order, walking away from everything he had known. The war had taken too much from him. The Order, once a beacon of light and hope, had become just another faction in a galaxy torn apart by conflict. He spent his days in meditation, seeking peace within himself. The darkness still lingered, but he was determined to find his own way, one not dictated by the Sith, the Jedi, or the Republic. He would not fight anymore. He would live out his days in silence, far removed from the violence of the galaxy. The path of the Jedi was no longer his. The Force, however, would always be a part of him. But Trebor would seek to find peace, not through battle, but through understanding. And so, Coleman Trebor faded into the shadows of history, a Jedi who walked away from the war, seeking solace and redemption in a galaxy that had long since forgotten the meaning of peace. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week for Fan Friday. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.